Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say he murdered three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Arkanasa Radio Studios in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Already getting off to a bad start. It's raining out. It's cold. Okay, tonight we're going to be doing Missing 4. I did a show called Missing 2 back in July 21st, 2018. Maggie asked me why I called it Missing 2. What happened to number 1? I thought I'd done a show on missing people, so I dug through the archives. The show had been called Into Thin Air on June 24th, 2017. Well, then I found Disappearances from September 27th, 2016. Okay, it got confusing. So this show is the 4th one on people who are missing, but only the 2nd with that title. I can't keep my archives in any form of order. In April of this year, my wife said I should do a special for the 100th show. I sat down and counted the shows in the archives to see which show would be number 100. It turned out I'd already done the 100th show when L.A. Marzulli came on back in March. If you wonder why I don't number the shows from the start, well, I did. I had all the Season 1, Episode 1, Season 1, Episode 2. It worked out okay up until we switched to Season 2. Then I noticed the numbers were coming out all mixed up. I did the quick and easy thing. I simply stopped numbering them. And now I've discovered a new problem. I forget to post the new shows on Podomatic. This means they don't get carried by Stitcher or iTunes or the other podcast hosters. I started moving all the past shows over to YouTube to save space at Podomatic. I found out I didn't post a Project Blue Book to Podomatic until Ghost Hunting 201 was out. Instead of getting all wrapped up in which show should follow which, I'll just keep putting them out in whichever order they fall in. YouTube is in no kind of numerical order. I've taken old shows from the past that never got put on YouTube, and I've been placing them there in the last couple of weeks. About 2/3 of all the shows on YouTube right now are the old shows from the past. So if you think I'm doing 3 or 4 shows a week, nah, I'm just posting old stuff. I already shell out a few $100s to keep the archives open. I have Pro Platinum account, which costs me $300 a year. It gives me 5 gigs of storage. For $500, I can become a broadcaster with 4 times more storage. Then I look around my office and I realize I could use some more storage here instead. So, until I win the lottery or some rich relative leaves me a huge inheritance, I'll just keep doing things this way. My problems have changed over the years. My dad used to say, if all the problems in the world were hung from a tree, we'd all pick our own. I'll stick to the problems I have. People go missing all the time. Most simply move away without telling anyone their plans. I would notice somebody from work was no longer around. Once I got around to asking, I'd be told they had transferred to another station. I wasn't on the list of people who they had told. I was the guy you talked to if you saw a ghost or a UFO, not the person folks went to with everyday things. Many people are under the impression their problems will all go away if they can just get a new start in a new location. This is called the geographical cure. It doesn't work. No matter how hard you try, we will all take our problems with us. Then there are the people who disappear for unknown reasons. They vanish not just from our lives, but from everyone's lives. They pull an Ambrose Bierce and step off the edge of the planet. The Bennington Triangle is an area of southwestern Vermont where a number of people went missing between 1945 and 1950. The shape of a triangle is the easiest way to describe an area where something like this takes place. It also sounds better than calling it the such-and-such circle or the so-and-so square. The triangle sounds better, I think, because of the Bermuda Triangle. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people disappeared in the Bennington area. The first occurred on November 12, 1945, when 74-year-old Mitty Rivers disappeared while hunting. Rivers was guiding a group of 4 hunters up the mountains. After getting to the hunt site and spending the day, it was time to get back to camp. Rivers got ahead of the group as they were coming down the trail on Long Trail Road near Vermont Route 9. He was still in sight when he followed the trail around a slight bend. As the others got to the point where he was no longer anywhere to be seen. Well, where he was last seen, he was no longer there. Thinking he must have continued on to camp, they didn't think anything of it, until they found Mitty wasn't at the camp. When it became apparent he was missing, a search was begun. The only thing found was one cartridge found near a stream that belonged to the type of rifle he'd been carrying. Now, Mitty Rivers was an experienced hunter and outdoorsman. He had a rifle and all of his gear with him, none of which was ever found. It was as if the ground opened up and swallowed him. And no sign of Mitty was ever found. Paula Jean Weldon, 18-year-old, disappeared about 1 year later on December 1st, 1946. Weldon was a sophomore at Bennington College. She had set out for a hike on the Long Trail. A lot of folks on the trail had seen her, including Ernest Whitman, a Bennington Banner employee who gave her directions. Paula was seen on the trail itself by an elderly couple who were about 100 yards behind her. According to them, she turned a corner in the trail, and when they reached the same corner, she was gone. This sounds exactly like the Mitty Rivers account. An extensive search was conducted when Paula Weldon failed to return to college campus that evening. A $5,000 reward was offered, and the FBI was called in to help search. No evidence of her was ever found. James E. Telford was a veteran. He became the 3rd person to disappear. He went missing December 1st, 1949, exactly 3 years after Paula Weldon had disappeared. Telford was a resident of Bennington Soldiers' Home. He'd been in St. Albans, West Virginia, visiting relatives, which is 150 miles to the north. It was during the return trip that things got mysterious. James took the local bus and was seen by several folks before he vanished. According to witnesses, Telford got on the bus in St. Albans and was still on the bus at the last stop, just a few miles before arriving in Bennington. Somewhere between the last stop and Bennington, Telford vanished. His belongings were still in the luggage rack, and there was an open bus timetable on his vacated seat. Now, he could have clomb out the window as the bus was traveling down the road, but this should have been seen by someone, and why would he choose to jump from a bus? Also, no body was ever found. The fourth person to vanish was 8-year-old Paul Jeffson. On October 12, 1950, Jeffson had been with his mother in their pickup truck. She left her son in the vehicle while she fed their pigs. This was back when this sort of thing was normal. Being a farming community, kids were safe being left in vehicles with the window down, and a crime being something that happened in other locations. His mother was gone for about an hour. When she got back to the truck, her son was nowhere in sight. A search party was formed to look for the child. Nothing was ever found, though Jeffson was wearing a bright red jacket that should have made him very easy to spot. Bloodhounds were brought in to track the boy's movements. They led their handler to the highway where 4 years earlier Paula Weldon had disappeared and Maddie Rivers 5 years previous. The fifth and last disappearance occurred 16 days after Jeffson had vanished. October 28, 1950, Frida Langer, 53, and her cousin Herbert Elsner left their family campsite near the Somerset Reservoir to go on a hike. As the cousins were walking through the woods, Langer slipped and fell into a stream. She wasn't hurt, but her clothes were soaked. So she told Elsner she was just going to walk back to camp and get some fresh, dry clothing. He was going to wait for her on the trail. It wasn't all that far, so it should have taken no more than 30 minutes. When Frida didn't return, Elsner made his way back to the campsite, thinking she must have changed her mind, or perhaps she got delayed somehow. When Elsner got to camp, he was surprised no one had seen his cousin. She never made it back as planned. The family went back up the trail looking for Frida, thinking she might have gotten lost. When no sign of her could be found, the authorities were called. Over the next 2 weeks, 5 searches were conducted, including aircraft, helicopters, and up to 300 searchers. No trace of Langer was found during the search. May 12, 1951, her body was found near the Somerset Reservoir. But this was an area that had been extensively searched 7 months previous. No cause of death could be determined because of the condition of her remains. But how is it that so many searchers had been through that area and had never found her body? Langer was the last person to disappear and the only one whose body was ever found. There's no direct connection between the people who disappeared, other than the time that they disappeared. They all vanished in the same small area. They all disappeared in the last quarter of the year, October, November, and December. They all vanished between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. No one has been reported missing in the Bennington Triangle since Langer went missing in 1950. Paranormal investigators have caught some very strange voices coming in over radios whenever they were tuned between stations. People walking through the area have reported seeing shadowy figures moving about in the woods around them. This, combined with GPS signals getting scrambled, makes the Bennington Triangle a very weird place. May 28th, 2011. 20-year-old Madison Scott drove over to Hogsback Lake near Vanderhoof, British Columbia. That's up in Canada. She and a group of friends were having a party at the lake. The gang did all the usual things kids do at parties in the great outdoors. They had a huge campfire, along with some beer and food. As the party was winding down, Madison decided to stay the night instead of trying to drive back home. She had brought her tent, and she pitched it next to her pickup for the night. When Madison didn't turn up back home, her folks began to worry. By the second day, they drove out to the campsite to see if something had come up to delay her from getting home. They found her truck with the tent still next to it. The tent had fallen down at some time during the day. A search of the tent revealed nothing to lead to their girl's whereabouts. Madison's purse was found in the truck, but the keys, along with her cell phone, were missing. Madison disappeared not far from Highway 16, which is also known as the Highway of Tears, which has been the site of a host of other disappearances and murders. It remains unknown whether Madison's fate is intertwined with those other women who vanished or were murdered on the highway, or whether something else took place that night. The Highway of Tears is a stretch of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia, Canada. It's all I can do to not go, aye. Since 1969, numerous women have gone missing along this 450-mile section of the highway. RCMP lists the number of missing or murdered women at 18, but the Aboriginal organizations speculate that the number ranges up into the 40s. 13 out of the 18 recorded victims were teenagers, while 10 of the 18 were Aboriginal descent. That would be Indians to us. In 2006, RCMP launched Project E-Pana, a special investigation unit that focused on the Highway of Tears disappearances and murders. The unit was originally given 9 cases in 2006, which then doubled into 18 cases. Due to the budget cutbacks in the past few years, E-Pana's officers and budget have been dramatically cut, significantly hampering investigations into the Highway of Tears. Madison was never found, and no clue as to where she went or why has ever been found. This stretch of highway has developed its own bad reputation over the years. I'd love to ask my RCMP friend John Kirk about this case, but I'll wait till I run into him again. I might do an entire show just on that one little piece. Oh, by the way, John Kirk is a cryptozoologist who lives up in Canada. I run into him on occasion at various conferences, and I've gotten to know him quite well. On September 24th, 1992, 23-year-old Dale Dinwiddie attended a U2 concert at Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, South Carolina. After the show, the gang all went out for drinks at a local watering hole called the 5 Points Bar. Sometime around 1 in the morning, her friends noticed Dale was no longer with them. They'd all been wrapped up in their conversations, and nobody ever noticed if she had left or not. Too much alcohol and not enough consideration. Unconcerned and thinking Dale had either gotten a ride home or was with someone she had met, they finished up their party and left. The last known person to see Dale was the bouncer at the bar, whom she had greeted before leaving. Dale was never seen or heard from again. Her parents reported her missing later that morning, and a search ensued. U2 pitched in as well, putting up a picture of the young woman on a large screen at their concerts 2 weeks later. To this day, Dale's parents are hoping to someday find their missing daughter. The police have exhausted all their resources trying to figure out where the young girl went. There have been over 1,000 leads, but they never pan out. The investigation is still going on. Another friend of mine from the Bigfoot community, Jeff Crypto Hulk Stewart, he's been on the show 3 times, has been talking about people going missing in and around Liberty County. These folks are listed on a website called the Missing Texas 40. You can check it out by searching Jeff Stewart fishgame.com. That's the Texas Fish and Game magazine. Just type in fishgame, one word, .com, and then search for anything by Jeff Stewart. In March 2000, a 23-year-old college student named Leah Roberts left home in Raleigh, North Carolina, with intentions of taking a road trip. She took most of her belongings, as well as her cat. She did not tell anyone where she was going. On March 18th, her Jeep was discovered on a logging road in Whatcom County, Washington, which is over 3,000 miles from her home. The vehicle had crashed over an embankment. The crash was enough to disable the vehicle, but it shouldn't have incapacitated the driver. There was no blood found at the scene and no indication of somebody being injured. Blankets had been placed over all the windows as if someone had turned the Jeep into a rudimentary shelter. Everything that had been in the Jeep was scattered all around the site. In the pocket of a pair of pants, investigators found $2,500. A search of the area around the crashed Jeep didn't turn up any trace of Leah or her cat. 1 week later, a man called the police to report having seen a woman matching Leah's description at a gas station miles from the crash site. The caller refused to give his name and hung up before the dispatcher could get any more information. Leah Roberts is still missing with no clue as to where she might have gone. And now we're going to talk about some people who have disappeared from cruise ships. Rebecca Coriam was born March 11th, 1987, in Countess of Chester Hospital, Chester, England. She lived in Chester with her parents, her sister Rachel, and 2 brothers. She graduated from the Chester Catholic High School. Once out of school, Rebecca worked at the Chester Zoo. This was kind of like a family tradition. Just about all her relatives had worked at the zoo at one time or another. There's a memorial bench in honor of her grandparents, Kevin and Dolores, on the zoo grounds. She was an outdoors kind of girl. She joined the British Army Cadets as a teenager. Rebecca attended Plymouth University at Exeter, studying sports science. Later, she got a staff volunteer position with the cadets and participated in outdoor events. She took additional studies in youth studies at Liverpool Hope University, and then spent 4 months teaching sports at Camp America in Maine. Physically active and in good shape, Rebecca was seeing the world and learning lots of things about it. In June 2010, Rebecca went to a job interview in London for the Disney Company. She was hired and told to report to Florida for training. Once her training was finished, Rebecca was assigned to the Disney Wonder, a cruise ship based out of the port of Los Angeles. The Disney Wonder is 964 feet long, with 945 crew members, and can handle 2,400 passengers. For comparison purposes, the Titanic was 883 feet long, with 892 crew, and it carried 2,434 passengers. The Disney Wonder left Los Angeles en route to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico on March 21, 2011. Disney cruise ships are built with the crew in mind. In order to keep the crew from having to deal with passengers during their off hours, the crew have their own entertainment sections of the ship. Just about every public space has CCTV monitors to keep an eye on things and help stop any frivolous lawsuits. Some folks are professional victims who look for ways to pretend to get hurt so they can sue a company. Kind of like that woman who was seen pouring a bottle of oil out on the floor of a grocery store, then laying down on the floor and trying to claim she had slipped and fell. The cameras have saved many a company from having to shell out for these despicable folks. Out at sea, there are no cell towers. You can log into the ship's Wi-Fi and use that, but it's usually pricey and you don't want to send too many texts or surf the web too much. If you're one of those folks who can't function without your phone, you might want to stick to land-based activities. March 22nd at 5:45 a.m., Rebecca was in the cruise area talking on a ship's phone. The CCTV recorded the area and placed a timestamp on the images. In the video, she looked a bit upset. A fellow crew member approaches and talks to her, to which she seems to say she was okay. On the video, the crewman is seen walking away, and Rebecca hangs up the phone, turns, and walks away from the camera. And I'm going to break right there and play a few commercials and drink some coffee, give my throat a chance to catch back up for the next 30 minutes. Don't go away, we'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Did you hear a bump in the night and you think it just might be a ghost? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. That's the LPRS for all your otherworldly needs. If you need to squint and hold things out at arm's length to see them, maybe you should get your eyes checked. Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, is right across from the Embassy Suites. Stop squinting and start seeing. Coffee, nectar of the gods. And at the Organic Man Coffee Trike, you'll find coffee made the right way, one delicious cup at a time. Stop on by 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. And remember, life is too short to drink bad coffee. Makeup isn't something you want to just smear on and hope for the best. You might come out looking like Lon Chaney. Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and get a free makeover to see how makeup should be done. 956-723-3019. This is Arkanasa Radio you've been listening to. And welcome back to the show. And we were just talking about the girl Rebecca. 9 a.m., Rebecca didn't show up for her shift. The crew supervisor called her room, but the phone wasn't answered. There were procedures to follow once a member was unaccounted for. They may have simply gotten wrapped up in something and missed their shift. The public address system began to page Rebecca, telling her to report to her station. Once there was no response, the crew was notified to look for the missing girl. A quick check of her room, followed by looking in all possible locations she might have been. As time ticked by, the situation grew dire. If she wasn't on the ship, well, there's only one place she could be. Overboard. The ship was miles out at sea, and there was no known way she could have gotten off the ship other than falling or jumping. Authorities in both Mexico and the United States were notified, and a possible rescue or search and recovery. As the Mexican Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard searched the waters behind the ship, the crew went on with entertaining the passengers. They kept an eye out for any sign of Rebecca or any clues as to what might have happened, but the passengers took priority. It is policy. Cruise ships don't want anything to interfere with their income. That's just the way it is. Let's just say somebody is caught red-handed stealing from one of the other passengers. What do you think might happen? Arrest? Jail time? Call the authorities at their next port of call and place the offender on trial? Nope. What happens in 99.9% of cases of theft, assault, or other illegal activity is the person committing the crime is removed from the ship at the next port, and that's it. In many instances, there isn't even a report filed. Cruise ships don't want people knowing there are crimes being committed while at sea. It's bad for business. The Disney Wonder is registered in the Bahamas. You'll have to do some digging to find any cruise ships that are actually registered in the United States. There are some, but most ships are registered in foreign ports for tax purposes. A detective from the Royal Bahama Police Force flew to Los Angeles to perform an investigation once the ship had returned to its home port. This was 3 days after Rebecca had vanished. He spent the day looking, asking questions. A lot of folks are under the impression that foreign investigators of any kind, foreign anything, is bad. The foreign law enforcement is all corrupt. This is mostly Hollywood. They almost always portray foreign law enforcement as being less than anything found here in the States. I don't know how good of a job this detective was able to do, since there was only the one CCTV showing Rebecca in her last minutes on this earth. Unfortunately, the Bahama police investigations are known as being amongst the worst on the planet. A very few members of the crew were questioned, and that was about it. A quick look at the CCTV tapes and a dig through Rebecca's quarters. Maybe a nice lunch compliments of the ship. The passengers would have left the ship, and the owners would have avoided asking them any questions, since they didn't want word getting around someone had disappeared from a cruise. Once again, it's bad for business. A final conclusion was bizarre, if unviable. Rebecca was said to have gone to the cruise swimming pool, where she was then washed overboard by a rogue wave. Like I said, unviable. Had a rogue wave hit the ship, every alarm on board would have gone off. Ships have been sunk by these nasty, unexplained ocean activities. This, combined with the netting along the rear of the ship, would have kept anyone from washing over the side. Like I said, Bahama investigations are known for the worst on the planet. So then it was decided she must have jumped overboard. The phone call Rebecca was seen making is supposed to have been so devastating that she decided to kill herself by jumping from the fantail and then drowning at sea. Maybe 1% of women who kill themselves do so by drowning. This is a slow and horrifying way to go. The investigation found a pair of flip-flops near the pool that were supposed to belong to Rebecca. The trouble was they were too big, they were not her kind of footwear, and they had somebody else's name written on them. The Disney company went to great lengths to make Rebecca's death either her own fault or simply an accident. They really didn't want to be an accident either. It was far better had she committed suicide. That would make the ship not quite so dangerous. A few reports came in from people who claimed to have seen Rebecca in various locations around Europe. To this day, Corium, the Coriums, that's the family, have found no answers as to what happened to their daughter. The Disney Corporation is happy to leave it as a suicide, even though there is no evidence that this is what happened. Just a side note, there is nobody named Disney currently on the board of directors of Disney. The happiest place on earth isn't really all that happy. As I was reading all the articles I could find about Rebecca Corium, I came across the International Cruise Victims Association. the ICV. I began reading other reports from cruise ship disappearances, and this caused the show to go in a different direction. The ICV represent victims of crime on cruise ships, their families and friends, and individuals concerned about the problem of victimization and disappearances on cruise ships. With several hundred members, the organization advocates for legislative reform to protect passengers from crime and increase the rights of victims of crime that do occur on cruise ships, and provide support to victims of crime occurring on cruise ships. The goal of the organization is to contribute to growing a cruise industry where passengers and crew members are safe and secure from victimization while on board a cruise ship. This is from their website, internationalcruisevictims.org. Yep, after reading their site, I have absolutely no intention of ever going to sea. Back in the past, it would be more understandable for people to vanish while at sea. Standards were not so high back then. But then, what are the standards of a cruise ship today? To begin with, once you arrive at the gangway to board the ship, you are given an ID card that you swipe as you board or go ashore. This is how the ship tracks passengers. As the ship makes various ports of call, some folks might leave the ship as their final destination. This is all recorded on a computer. Once the ship hits its final destination, the ship is emptied of all passengers so the cleaning crew can ready it for the next voyage. Should there be a discrepancy between the numbers coming on board with the numbers ashore, a quick search is made to see if the person is still there. If the missing passenger is not found, they are declared missing and believed to have fallen overboard. Back before computers kept track of everything, it was easy to miss someone. But today, there should not be very many folks missing from the records. Over 200 people are still listed as missing in just the last few years. This might sound like a small number unless you're a relative or one of the missing. Try to imagine not knowing what has become of your son or daughter or your father or your mother. They went away on a ship and never returned. Cruising has never been more popular, but sailing the high seas has never been more dangerous. According to the International Cruise Victims Association, every 2 weeks someone goes missing from a cruise ship. Most of these are unaccounted for, and no evidence exists for far too many cases on what really happened. March 21st, 1998, Amy Lynn Bradley, her parents Ron and Iva, and her brother Brad left for a week-long cruise on Rhapsody of the Sea, which is registered out of Norway. Early in the morning on March 24th, Bradley had been drinking in the dance club with the ship's band, Blue Orchid. One of the band members, Alistair Douglas, said he and Bradley had partied at about 1 a.m. She'd had a few drinks, but she didn't look drunk. Sometime around 5:15 or 5:30 in the morning, Bradley's father, Ron, saw her asleep on the cabin balcony. It was a nice warm night and the water was smooth. Ron got up at about 6 a.m. and he noticed Amy was no longer on the balcony. Thinking she had risen and gone looking for breakfast, Ron went to the dining hall. Not finding his daughter in the dining hall, Ron began wondering where she might have gotten to. He tried several locations before deciding he should ask for help. The ship was about to put into Caracalla, Antilles, just north of Venezuela. Once the ship docked in port, an extensive search was made of the ship, and a call went out for any boats or ships in the area to keep an eye out. The Netherlands Antilles Coast Guard conducted a 4-day search that ended on March 27th. The Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines chartered a boat in order to continue looking for Amy, but this activity came to an end on March 29th without finding anything. Bradley had been a trained lifeguard who could swim and knew how to survive in the water. Investigators said there was no evidence that she had fallen overboard or committed suicide. The family was left with only questions as they boarded a plane for home. They continued to hold out hope Amy would turn up somewhere. The cruise ship did question the crew about any sightings of Amy during the hours before she went missing, but no witnesses came forward. In August 1998, a couple of tourists from Canada said they'd spotted Amy Bradley while visiting a beach in Curaçao. They described several tattoos Amy had had. One being a Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball that Amy had on her shoulder. The Canadian couple also said the woman they'd seen was sporting a sunburst on her lower back and a gecko lizard near her navel. The odds of two women having the same tattoos in the same places is ridiculous to even think about. So who was the woman these folks saw? When authorities were notified and arrived at the beach, the woman was no longer there. A search of the area turned up no one matching Amy's description. There is a $250,000 reward offered by the Bradley family for information leading to Bradley's return, and a $5,000 reward for information leading to her verifiable location. In other words, her body. The FBI is offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to her recovery. Their case has been featured on America's Most Wanted and the television show Disappeared. December 4th, 2004 was the last night of a 9-day Mexican Riviera cruise for 37-year-old Annette Meisner from Waukesha, Wisconsin, her daughter, and her parents aboard a Carnival cruise ship, the Pride. Annette and her daughter had spent the day together doing mom and daughter things. Throughout the day, Annette had only 2 or 3 drinks. Annette was the winner of a treasure hunt awarded earlier that afternoon while snorkeling off the side of the ship. No one who saw her had any concern she might have been drinking too much or was in any way incapacitated. Meisner was last seen at 9:15 p.m. on December 4th while the ship was 30 miles off the coast of Ensenada, Mexico, 120 miles south of San Diego, California. The ship was bound for Long Beach, California, and was scheduled to arrive the following day. She was headed to the casino to play bingo along with many folks on board, which was in another part of the ship from the casino. The search for Meisner began at 10 p.m. There was no sign of her on board the ship, although her purse was found by her family next to a 3-foot railing on one of the lower decks at 11 p.m. The family had to insist on having the area roped off to preserve any evidence, and one of the crew came by and began to clean the deck around where the purse was found. It took the captain 3 hours before he launched any boats to search the area behind the ship. When the investigation into her disappearance began, the purse was missing from the evidence. Darn cat. My cat tried to jump up onto the desk and, well, didn't quite make it. When the investigation into her disappearance began, the purse was missing from the evidence. It was later returned, but it appeared that it had been wiped clean. On the CCTV, Meisner was seen talking to one of the crew, but when asked, the crewman said he had not left the bingo room any time between 9 and 10. They also found a map showing the location of all the security cameras. All during the investigation, the cruise ship company seemed to be more concerned with maintaining the reputation as a fun place to sail instead of finding out what had happened to Annette. Once more, the passengers were released without ever being questioned, and only a few members of the crew were asked. No one ever ran background investigations on any of the crew. On February 29, 2012, Fariba Amani, a 47-year-old mother of two from Vancouver, Canada, took a cruise with her boyfriend named Ramiz Gulshani. The ship was to sail to the Bahamas from Florida. Her boyfriend said the last time he saw Fariba was at the gift shop at about 1 in the morning. She was looking at souvenirs, and so he left to spend time in the casino. After gambling for a few hours, Ramiz walked back to their cabin. Fariba wasn't in the room yet, but this was supposed to be normal between the two. They were together, but they spent time apart. He went to bed expecting her to come along sometime later. When he woke at 7, Fariba still hadn't returned, so Ramiz went looking for her. He asked the crew if anyone knew where she might be. Well, this led to a search of the entire ship. There was no record of her disembarking. When Fariba couldn't be located, the Coast Guard was notified to begin a search along the path the ship had followed up from the Bahamas. The police and the FBI launched an investigation into Fariba's disappearance. They searched the ship from top to bottom. An 84-hour, 10,000-square-mile Coast Guard search was unable to find any sign of her. For some unknown reason, none of the security cameras were checked for images of Fariba. Instead, the authorities went with the idea she probably jumped from the ship or tripped and fell overboard at some point during the last night. The story was she had probably been drinking, got sloppy drunk, and either tripped and fell or jumped. However, Fariba's sister insists that she did not drink. There's no record of her drinking at the bar either. A theory did come up that perhaps Fariba had been killed by some stranger for unknown reasons. Then her boyfriend came under suspicion. Fariba's family told authorities the couple had been having difficulties and the cruise had been a last-ditch effort to reconcile their relationship. Ramiz insisted he and Fariba were not in any kind of dispute. He claimed they were getting along great. There was no evidence of foul play, but then what might have been on the CCTV cameras that was never looked at? Most cruise lines will insist sailing is great fun and it's safe. And since 2000, nearly 200 passengers have vanished without any explanation. Reading all these missing persons cases have brought out several ideas as to what might have been going on. Too much alcohol is being consumed by people who probably shouldn't be drinking. Some folks think they can't have fun without being lightheaded or downright drunk. As long as the passenger is still awake, bartenders will keep filling their glasses. Out at sea, there is no cutoff limit. Cruise lines make lots of money from bar tabs, since no one has to actually pay until the bill arrives a month later. You don't hand over money during a cruise. You're issued a card that serves as your ID as well as your credit. Anything you want on board ship, you just swipe the card and it's yours. Food is included in the initial price of the trip, but all those extras add up in a nasty way. The folks running things should consider limiting the number of drinks allowed, but this might put a dent in their profits. Then there's the crew. Now, most crews working on ships are just folks who need a job, and this is how they earn their living. Cruise ship personnel work long hours, but they also work so many months a year. They get to sail to whatever destination the ship is heading, and during off hours the crew gets shore leave to enjoy exotic locations. The companies who hire cruise ship personnel do a very rudimentary background investigation. They want people who are willing to work long hours at low pay. Lots of the folks who get hired come from low-income backgrounds. The entertainers are well paid, but the people doing all the work to keep things running are not. The thing is, the passengers aboard ship are expecting nothing but fun, sun, and adventure, while trusting everybody around them to behave. In law enforcement, we had 5 levels that we worked in. These were represented by colors. Green was relaxed and not looking for any problems. This was sitting at home watching TV. Blue was you kept an eye on everybody around you, just in case. Yellow was elevated alertness. Orange was high alert, anytime you stepped out of your vehicle. Red was when things were about to happen. As you walked out the door en route to the station, you should have been at yellow. That's right, yellow and not blue. Why? Putting on a uniform, a gun, and a badge, you become a target for some crazy people who want you dead simply because you represent authority. Once you were at work, you just about had to stay at yellow or orange all the time. The folks going on a cruise drop down to green and they stay there. They never consider the people around them might just have other ideas than enjoying a vacation. What about the con artist who books a cruise so he can steal wallets, cameras, and jewelry? How about a serial rapist who knows if he gets caught, he'll be thrown off the ship, but nothing more will happen? Then there are the serial killers. And keep in mind, serial killers are always described as being the nicest folks on earth. This is how they catch their prey. Could there be a serial killer who uses cruise ships as his playground? Something to keep in mind. The FBI profilers keep coming up with formulas that tell who might be a serial killer. The serial killers keep proving the FBI wrong. Ted Kaczynski was a college professor who decided to kill people because technology was going to put him out of a job. If his brother hadn't turned him into the FBI, they would still be looking for the Unabomber in somebody's basement. There could be a serial killer delivering dinner to some stateroom on board ship. Public relations should never be considered over security. Unfortunately, those security cameras are there to prevent lawsuits and not stop crime. Now, so what can you do to prevent becoming a story on a podcast? I would say stay on land, but you might not want to do that. I don't have any desire to go sailing into the history books. Okay, keep an eye on those around you. It's that super helpful guy who's probably trying to steal your wallet. Just be aware of what's going on around you. Late night rendezvous are dangerous even on land, but at sea it's so much easier to dispose of a body. Why make life easier for the killer than you already are? Don't go wandering around the decks in the dead of night. It's one thing to take a stroll to see the moonlight, but stay in the areas where others are. Take a friend if you must go and stick together. Watch each other's backs. If you are going for a stroll by yourself, tell your friend where you're going to be and when you should get back. That way, if you do take a plunge overboard, your friend should be able to get the crew to start looking for you before the sharks find you. Now, if you're the friend and somebody is missing, get the search started. It's far better to look like a worrywart and still have your friends around than try to act casual, only find out the rest of your life you're going to wonder what happened to them. Try to stay at least sober enough so you don't fall overboard. That water is deep and there are critters in it that might consider you a good meal. That and the cruise cost you quite a bit of money, so you should be able to remember what you did. I hope you enjoyed the show. Tell your friends. The archives are slowly being moved over to YouTube, but I still post all the new stuff on Podomatic. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James. I hope you've enjoyed what I've been talking about.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.